Brendan, how do I say more with less? How do I become more concise? How do I make an impact on the world with less words? And that's exactly why in this week's episode, I'm going to dispel a lot of the assumptions that we have about talking concisely so that we can say more with less. Hi everyone, I hope you're doing amazing. Brendan here from Master Talk, your go-to channel to mastering your talk. And today we're covering the art, or rather, the real art of saying more with less and being more concise. So let's get into it. You'd be surprised to learn that I fundamentally believe in the idea that being concise is actually literally impossible. You can't do it, especially if you're giving presentations that are spontaneous. If you're at a wedding and the groom looks at you and says, Brendan, give a speech, and you're like, nobody told me to prepare for it. How in the world are you supposed to be concise? I believe that's a bad expectation because you're setting yourself up to fail. The better question to ask is, how do I appear more concise? As I'm rambling on this camera and I'm speaking to you about being more concise, I'm not actually concise, but rather I give the appearance that I am. The issue that we have from an audience's point of view is when someone starts to ramble on and on and on, the criticism that we give them is we say, oh, you're not concise. That's not true. The real criticism we're giving them is that they're boring. These are two different things. A good example is Gary Vaynerchuk. So he's a serial entrepreneur who's built many companies over his life, and he's also a professional keynoter. And another thing about Gary that's important to note is he rambles like crazy. He's always talking. But the difference is nobody looks at him and says, Gary, you're not concise. And the reason they don't say that is because he's entertaining. So the goal of this conversation is not to be more concise, but rather having the appearance or giving the appearance to be concise. So now it begs the question, how do we create the appearance of feeling concise? Well, there's two parts to that answer. The first one is an obvious one. Prepared speeches. If you actually have time to get ready in advance, then being more concise is so much more easier. Because in that context, you can write out your entire pitch, or if you're giving a video presentation like this, I write out everything in full, so I'm a bit more concise. Then after, all you need to do is ask the following question that I got from Tim Ferriss. Get people in a room and ask them, if you were to remove one part of my presentation, which part would you remove and why? That way, you're able to really understand objectively what's adding value to your audience and what isn't. So in that way, as you progress and you do the same presentation 50 to 100 times, which is my hope for you, then your presentations will be a lot more concise and a lot more cleaner so that every single person who's watching you falls in love with your message. Now let's talk about part two to the answer, which is impromptu presentations. The idea of feeling more concise, since you don't have time to prepare in this situation, is not really thinking about the content or getting worried about it, but rather saying, how can I make this experience as entertaining as possible for my audience? If you lose your train of thought, it's not because you're not concise, it's because the way that you structure your presentation is wrong, right? If you're someone who's being said, hey, you're not being concise, the issue is probably that you're too monotone in the way that you're varying your vocal tones. There's always an opportunity somewhere to make your presentation more exciting and entertaining. Let's take the usual exercise I give, the random word exercise, which is you take a random word in the house that you're in or the place that you're in, and you create a presentation out of thin air. So let's say I take ribbon. Ribbons aren't just a piece of cloth. Ribbons allow us to remember memories that matter. Whether it's a blue ribbon that we got for running that first race, whether it's the blue ribbon that we got for acknowledging someone that matters to us, or even just the blue ribbon that we bought to create something out of it that matters to people. That's why in today's presentation, I'm going to convince you that even if I'm talking about something that's completely random and not concise at all, you're bought into what I'm saying. And for some reason that you don't understand, you want to go out there and buy some blue ribbons. So remember, the art of being concise is not about speaking less, but rather saying more in an entertaining way. If there's anything that you take away from this week's episode, it's this. The way that we look at being more concise is bad. It's damaging to our ability to speak freely, openly, and confidently. If your expectation in a presentation is, I need to make sure that every little syllable and every single word needs to be perfect, then you're setting yourself up to fail. But if you say instead, I'm going to do the best that I can to make myself known in the least possible amount of time, now you're setting yourself up for a bit more success. Because as you get better and you're presenting the same thing over and over again, you'll find better ways to make something complex and not really concise, precise, accurate, and riveting. As always, if you enjoyed this week's episode of Master Talk, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well to see more videos like this. And if you know someone who really isn't that concise and is always talking all the time, send them this video so that they'll realize that being concise wasn't the problem at all. See you next time, everyone. Take care.